The passion was cars.
I got you.
And then the passion became, wow, look at what these cars are capable of. And then I just became just really in tune with the difference between winning and losing is such a fractional thing. And although it looks like an individual sport, it's not at all.
Brendan, thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited for a conversation today. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And, I got to, we met over lunch and I was so inspired by your story. So I'm going to try to spend time on it. But it's not going to be one of those Joe Rogan, like 4 hours,
No.
but still, like, there's so many things we can talk about. But here's how I want to start, because even though I'm going to do an introduction to the conversation later on, you have so much stuff when I read your book and when I research about you. But I want to give a sense to people. What would you choose? What would you say is like 3 milestones in your life that kind of made you who you are and where you are now?
I think when I think of milestones, I think my first milestone would be finding good mentors. So it wouldn't be one. I had a series of 6 mentors throughout my career, but finding them just accelerated the trajectory of my career.
So give me an example. Because it's like literally feel like your life was going a particular way, and then you met that person and it went in a different direction.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the story of my first mentor. I worked at EDS, 120,000 person company. I was a developer, a coder.
How old were you?
I was 21, and somehow he did a meeting with all the new people in this division. He was a president of our division, so he was 10 levels above me. And somehow during it came out that we shared the same birthday. So it's great. He goes, "Oh, we ought to go golfing." And I said, "Great." So he took me to his country club. I had never golfed in my life. He was at the time probably just about 50.
So for you, like your dad's parents, like your parents' age, right?
And I said, "Sure." I had never golfed. I borrowed clubs. We're on the driving range, and he comes over, puts his arm around me. He goes, "You're not a golfer. You've never golfed before, have you?" I said, "No, I never have." And he just took me under his wing from there. And actually, he taught me how to golf. He invited me back, but he also helped me with my career. And I still remember one time he said, "Brendan, I think you're a pretty good technical guy, but I think you're better with people than you are coding." And I don't know if that meant I wasn't a good coder. But I think what he saw is that, I was good at problem solving. I was good with the clients. So it took me from a technical track over to an account management and client side of the business. So just he saw that in me. I enjoyed coding, so I didn't see that in myself. I also knew I enjoyed people. But so that would be milestone 1, just finding mentors that invested time in me, to kind of launch my career. And then throughout my career.
But let me just pause for a second, because I hear it differently, right?
Yep.
So here you are, 21-year-old kid, just finished out of college, knows computer well, right? You knew computers. And then you had the audacity to say someone who's 30 years older than you, "I'll play golf with you," without playing golf. I think that's a milestone more than actually. Now it's true, he's a mentor, and who am I to narrate your own story? But just to pause for a second, what made you have that courage or audacity or whatever the chutzpah, as we say in New York, to say to the guy? And didn't you feel like you're going to look like a fool because you never golfed before?
I think sometimes it's good to be young and naive. Because
on the verge of stupid, right?
Yeah,
like the worst thing what's going to happen.
Just like, exactly.
You fall on your ass.
Or here, I was probably thinking, "Oh, it's in a couple weeks, I can learn." Who knows what I was thinking? But I do tell people every time you get a chance to do something, try it. Try something new.
That's your first book is about, right?
Yeah, it is. It's and there's somebody I talk about in the first book. His name is John, and he said that one of his milestones was reading or the movie Yes, with John Kerry.
Love this movie.
Up till then, he always said no. He watched that movie, started saying yes, and he said when he started saying yes, opportunities just started popping up in his life, and he talks about that story. I would say the second milestone was meeting my girlfriend, who became my fiance, who became my wife of 27 years. Because I like to mentor a lot of the next generation, and I tell all of them the biggest decision you'll make in your entire life is who you marry, your spouse, your partner. There are definitely times in my career where she could have held me back. She could have, maybe been negative when I had a setback or a failure, but instead kind of always breathed life and momentum. And, when my courage was running low or my faith was running low, she picked it up. So I think that would be the second milestone.
Well, so let me ask you, I've been married 27 years
Oh,
too.
wow.
So
You must have gotten married really young because
I'm 53,
you look great.
so thank you. Why is she so supportive? Because here's what I'm trying to get, right?
Yeah.
So I'm listening to people I'm thinking about people who listen to the podcast, and a podcast about failures and what we learn. I'm took one company public, ran a public company for a while, and then it blew up in my face and lost everything. Went through bankruptcy. I mean, I have a book about it. I'm not hiding anything, right? So, but there's, like you said, there's people you picked up because you pointed so far in 2 milestones. They're both about humans. They're not about I made that investment or So here's a life partner, a wife, a partner, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
You say this is fundamental to my success. What about her make her so supportive?
I just think that just comes to chemistry, compatibility, how you see each other's role. But I will tell you, I really got her put to the test. So that gentleman I talked about, who was my mentor, his name was Bill Durancheck. He called me in his office July of 1997. I was getting married in September of 1997. That's how I remember. And he said, "Hey, you just got promoted. You're going to go work for our vice chairman. You're going to go head this team up." And I was like, "This is fantastic." And I literally went running out of his office. And then I ran back in, and we were living in Northern Virginia, just outside of D.C. That's where she was from. And I said, "Hey, wait, Gary, he's at headquarters down in Dallas. What do I do?" He goes, "Well, you're moving there." And this was a Thursday. And he said, "You start Monday. You got to move this weekend."
Wow.
And I remember having to go home that night and saying to my fiance at the time, "Hey, we're getting married in 2 months. You've grown up your entire life here. What do you think?" And she's like, "Okay, we better start packing."
So when you ask, what do you think? Did you actually? I know it's been a while.
Yeah.
But what if she said, "I don't want to move"?
Well, I got asked this question once when I was telling the story. They said,
This is the second time now.
no, they said, "What if she had said no?"
Yeah.
I don't know. As much as I love her, at that point in my life, I was very, career focused. And I think that if my wife were here right now, she would say, "Yep, he was as advertised." She knew I was career focused. She knew that.
Well, that's maybe the person she fell in love with.
Yeah.
She knew that it's chopping your wings off.
Well,
if she doesn't let you fly, right?
She actually brought this up just the other day because our daughter just started her career here in New York City in investment banking, and we're doing Thanksgiving plans around her schedule. And our daughter was like, "I'm so sorry." And my wife put her arm around me. She goes, "Oh, no, I've spent many years planning holidays around other careers."
Yes.
And so I think she kind of understood my role was to kind of lead the family on a career standpoint. Her career was secondary to mine. And then secondly, we moved 12 times.
Yeah.
She kind of knew if I choose this guy with his desires in his career, I'm going to have to be willing to accept change.
Yeah. I think, I don't know your wife, but I will give her credit anyway. I think just from being married for a long time and knowing so many relationships that work and so many relationships that do not work or did not work, is that when someone understands the strength and the weakness of the partner, right? So she knew you have a huge drive.
Yep.
She's like, let him fly. And that's going to be I'm going to be the wings, the wind beneath him.
And that's why we kind of have the joke, as advertised.
Yes.
It's she would say, "Hey, who I met when she was 21 when we met, and she's 52 now." She would say, "I've changed, but I haven't changed over those years. I've grown as a human, but some of that core DNA of being committed to whatever I'm working on still is there today." And so we kind of have, lead and support role.
Yeah.
And it's worked well.
Amazing. And okay, the third one.
The third one, isn't people related, but a mentor was part of it still, was the day I became a first-time CEO. I had, I've always been very goal-oriented. Every year, in the month of December, I have these 4 exercises that I do to plan for the next year. And one of them is doing goals. And I remember saying, I wanted to be a CEO by the time I was 30. Ambitious, and I became a CEO right before my 30th birthday, and it was in Silicon Valley. It was a turnaround. Company had 6 months before it was going to go out of business with money. Remember my mentor at the time, it was actually the gentleman I went to work with in Dallas, Gary Fernandez. I said, what do you think about this opportunity? He goes, it's perfect. If you save it, it's because of you. And if it failed, it wasn't because of you. I hadn't
a win-win
looked at it
situation,
that
right?
way.
You can always blame someone else because only 6 months in the account, right?
Yeah.
And if you turn around, you're a legend.
And we were able to turn it around, which was great.
How did you turn? Like, not the details, but here's what baffles me. And I think that it's a theme through your career, from if I'm reading it correctly. You have big balls.
Yeah.
You're willing to take substantial amount of risk on yourself. Okay, so what's the kind of bring us to the here you are, 30-year-old.
Yep.
And you say, I can do it. Did you just fake it till you make it? Like I'm saying on the outside that I can do it, inside you're freaking out, I didn't sleep at night, or you literally believed you can turn around? Yeah,
so I've had a life motto, and I actually said this at my college graduation. And I ended my talk with the students with it, and it's have the courage to fail and the faith to succeed. And if you dissect that, it's like have the courage to fail. Go into something going, I might fail. Like accept that failure is an option. We've all heard failure is not an option. Well, failure is an option. Now you can will it not to happen, but when you decide I'm going to run a marathon, when you decide I'm going to start a podcast, it could fail. Mm-hmm. You could
actually a higher chance it's going to fail. All of those,
exactly. I'm going to start a business, higher chance of failing. But so have the courage to start and have the courage to say I might fail, but have the faith that hey, if I work hard and I do this right, it's going to succeed.
Yeah.
Because if you go in and you have the courage to fail, but you don't have the faith that you're going to succeed, then when things don't break your way, you'll not use it as an excuse, but you can become a victim.
Yeah.
You can easily say, oh, the capital markets dried up. I wasn't able to build the business, or, our product never got accepted, so the business didn't take off, or I didn't make the team because the coach didn't like me. If you want to look for things that didn't bounce your way, they're all around us. So, I've always kind of stuck to that, have the courage to fail and the faith to succeed. So that's what got me to, take this role. And here's what's real interesting, and I'm going to talk a story of another mentor, a mentor who I was working for at one point. I said, how come I always get stuck on the shittiest projects? And he said, because you're good at fixing things.
Exactly, yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? I said, like I got this where it's running really well. Why can't I just enjoy it? Because he said, because that's not what you're good at. You're good at when we put you on what's not working, you figure out how to make it work.
And I doubt, maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt you'll actually enjoy the smooth sailing. You probably will be like antsy after a while, right? Because you're a look, you're a race driver.
Yeah.
I've done all the BMW courses. I have that race driving license that I got after the 6th course of BMW. The adrenaline, the pushing the envelope is who you are, right? So the question, when did you surrender to who you actually are?
Well, what's interesting about it is when he told me that, I had never looked at it that way. Because, at that point in your career, you just got put on assignments.
Yeah.
You didn't pick things. You get told, hey, you're on this. Hey, you're on this. I didn't realize that a pattern was forming, that I was getting put on, projects that required somebody to solve it. And I viewed it as I'm getting put on stuff nobody else wants to get
fair,
put
right?
on.
Like, what are they putting on me? Yeah.
And then once it was running, I would get pulled and put on the next problem.
It's exhausting, isn't it sometimes?
Well, you would think it's exhausting until you realize that is who you are. And I think that's where, having mentors and people older than you that can see things in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself. So that's why that mentor, when he said, hey, here's a company that's broken, running out of capital, but he actually said, I think you can go fix it. And I had a thesis of how to fix it. And he goes, that's what you're good at. And to your point, the last company that I helped build and sell, we went from 500 million in assets to 2.7 over 4 years. We did it all organically. Went from 9 million in EBITDA to 186. we sold it to Bain Capital.
Bain, right?
Yeah, in the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. And I agreed to stay on for 2 years after. And I remember them saying, hey, will you stay on for longer? And I said, like, I don't enjoy when it's just in maintenance mode. And that we kind of got it to, we weren't going to have that astronomical growth anymore. It wasn't going to go from 2.7 billion to 5. But when it was going to go from 2.7 to 3 to 3.3, I said, you can get a lot of people who can run this for 5, 10%
like a great
growth.
COO will be better than a visionary CEO.
Yeah, and I said, I'm just, I just, this doesn't do it for me. But I didn't realize that until, I was more in that maintenance mode. And I think that's what you hit on.
Yeah,
is what
I also
you enjoy.
I also think that sometimes a great turnaround guy, a person who knows how to get from, kind of the minus to the plus, from the red to the black on the Excel spreadsheet, when they stabilize the business, they're so used to the drama, they create new drama that is unnecessary. So sometimes I work with a CEO and I will be like, you just love creating problems because in the past you used to fix problems. There's no more problems. Now you're creating new problems.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the challenges. You're so used to turning things around, but there's nothing to turn anymore. Can you have the ability to full speed and then zero and then full speed and then zero?
Yeah, it's true. Fortunately for me, I had the good fortune of running 6 different companies. 4 of them were turnarounds. 2 were transformations, and I separate what a turnaround is and what a transformation.
Explain to us, how do you see
to
the
me,
two?
a turnaround is the company's in trouble and it actually it needs to go from unprofitable to profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Transformation is, hey, it's growing. Like, I'll take the last company. It was growing 2% a year. It was making money.
Yeah.
So
$500 million.
So
nice,
it was
right?
doing okay.
Yeah.
It just wasn't reaching its maximum potential.
Yeah.
So it was really turning it into a business transformation where the industry was growing 5%. We grew in excess of 100% a year. So that's more of a transformation versus a turnaround is like, okay, I actually have to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
I got to operate on this company. But fortunately for me, these were venture backed or private equity backed. So they all had an exit. So, once we got it turned around, got it fixed, transformed it, there was an exit. And that was my off ramp to go find that, in your parlance, that next adrenaline rush and not have to stay on. And matter of fact, in a couple instances when they said, hey, we'd like you to come with the new business, I would opt out. I'd say, I don't want to, hey, I did that. That was great. But I actually want to go find that next challenge as opposed to staying on.
When you walk into a company, like someone calls you and say, or you see an opportunity when you were younger or later on, and you're saying there's a difference between transformational and a turnaround, right?
Yep.
What's the first action that are different between the two? Like you said, stop the bleeding, right? But isn't the same also in a transformational? Like I got to stop where we're wasting our energy. Maybe it's not the money, but the energy. How is your state of mind when you walk into those two kind of companies?
The state of mind, I actually walk in with the same state of mind. The number one thing I do is try to listen, because like I'll try to go in with a thesis, but I never go in thinking the thesis is right. I never go in thinking, oh, I've got it figured out. My last company, I was fortunate. I had been their biggest client for a number of years, and then I was on the board. So that thesis, I probably felt the most comfortable out of all of them because I really got
experience from the
I
other
had a
side,
front row
and you were
seat.
like, yeah.
But in my book, Dare to Disrupt, I lay out 8 pillars, and the first 3 pillars. If you get the first 3 pillars wrong, it doesn't matter if you get everything else right. The first 3 pillars are leadership, people, and culture.
Yeah.
True
I love
story.
the example about the engine you give in the book about those are the fundamental part of the engine, right?
Yeah, well, it's a fundamental part of the engine, and I remember, one time we had a big bank meeting. We had about $2 billion in assets, so we had all the bankers in the meeting, and just in the middle of the presentation, I had a slide that said, "We're going to go," and we were a fleet management company. I had a slide. I just threw it out just as kind of a joke that we were going to start selling pool furniture. And I said, hey, guys, I just threw this in here to see if you were paying any attention.
Yeah, exactly. They're falling asleep,
And one of the bankers said, if you guys decided to sell pool furniture, you'd be the best damn pool furniture company going. And I think that kind of hits to, if you build the right leadership, if you instill the right culture, and I say right culture because a culture that's right for company A isn't right for company B. So you can't just have a cookie cutter approach to culture. Yep. Companies are different, industries are different. And then if you have the right people in the right seats, I could argue you can go in any direction and be successful.
So you can you be agnostic? Can you go from Coca-Cola to a car company to a SaaS company from your perspective?
Yeah, man, this is going to have a theme of a mentor. One of my mentors told me early on, hey, try to be industry agnostic in your career because you'll have more opportunities than if you stay focused in an industry.
Yeah.
And great advice. And I give that advice out all the time. So
Too late for me because I've done 20 years of real estate. And now when I'm working with PE and private equity and other, all they know is what's on my resume. And I was like, no, I've sat on boards. I can do it. No, you're a real estate guy, but yeah, that's a great advice. No one told me when I started.
So I've got a funny story on it too. So I started in technology, moved over into financial services, did a stint in marketing services, and ended in fleet management. And I still remember the day that my first day at Mertz Fleet Management Company, they announced me. We did this little, event and all that. I'd been only the second CEO outside of the family. It was a family-owned business. And as I'm walking back to my office, the two people in front of me said, "Can you believe we hired somebody with no fleet management experience?"
And they don't even know you yet,
no,
right?
And I'm behind them. They have no idea. So I kind of cruised up in the fast lane on the side, and I go, "Can you believe that? That's crazy."
Did they know that?
And all of a sudden, I just saw the expression on
The first reaction was like, shoot, I'm like, caught, I'm going to be fired. But
what I'd say is I think it can be a big advantage if you're willing to lead with humility, if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to learn. And I will say this, though, multiple times over the next 4 years, I'd pop by their office and say, "Hey, how's the non-fleet guy doing here?" And they're like, "Oh, we're never going to live that down." And I would joke them and say, "No, never."
What are the tricks, actions, things you do to get a culture of a place? Let's say tomorrow morning I say, "Hey, do me a favor, Brandon, come with me. I want you to help me with this business." What are the questions you either ask or you look for in the beginning, the really beginning, to understand the culture? Because like you said, a law firm of something junior the third is very different than a startup in Silicon Valley. So how do you get a sense of the culture?
So, one thing before I took each of those jobs, one thing I requested of each board was, hey, could I come visit the company unannounced and could I just walk around? And the reason for that is I just wanted to see the company before I started. And I remember one company, and I wrote about this in I think the FUD Factor. It was up in Boston. I went and visited the company. We had a badge and we did all that. And I walked around. I remember coming out calling my wife, and this was a turnaround. This was a company in trouble. And I remember calling my wife and saying, "Oh, this is perfect." She goes, "What makes it perfect?" I go, "Culture's dead."
How do you know?
I said, I walked around the building. No one said hi to me. No one questioned that I was there. I went.
And did you walk around by yourself, or
by
you walk
myself.
around with one of those posses of?
Nope.
Fine.
No,
it wasn't maybe potential CEO comes around.
Because I was unannounced. They didn't know who I was.
That's going to change the people's behavior.
They first of all, they had a campus. They had the headquarters building. And then, quote unquote, down the hill was the call center. And we had 400 or 500 people in the call center. I don't remember exactly. And I remember the carpet was really old and worn out. The paint looked old. The lights, when a light went out, they didn't.
That's an indication.
So I just walked around and I said, "This is perfect. Culture's dead."
Yeah.
She goes, "Why is it perfect?" I said, "Well, if it's a turnaround, it needs to get fixed." And if I walked in and I was like, "Wow, this culture's great. It's got a great vibe and the people are engaged and everyone's having a good day," in front of me, I'd be like, "What am I going to do?"
Yes. How the hell am I going to do that if it's, running, right? Like you're asking if you need to turn around from a balance sheet perspective, but the culture is great, then there's a much maybe deeper or biggest problem.
Yeah. So there's a methodology I called right side up, where it's like, well, how do you build it from the right side up versus when people look at things, they look oftentimes at the negative side of it. Like I remember at that company, its name was QualiXerve. We renamed it to Worldwide Tech. I remember saying, okay, in the call center, in my second week, I want us to, over the weekend, roll out new carpet, big facility, paint and do the lights. And they go, "We can't do that in a weekend." And I said, "Let's see what we can do." We actually pulled it off. But it was a clear message to the employees that we care.
Is it? Yeah. And there's a new sheriff in town. And, the music is gonna change, right?
And it goes back to that theory, the broken glass theory.
Yes.
And if anyone's not familiar with the broken glass theory, the way I explain the broken glass theory, which may or may not be right, is, you walk past a building and there's no broken glass, you wouldn't pick up a rock and throw it at it. If you walked past a building and it was all broken, you might pick up a rock and throw it at it. So, when we were sending a message to the employees, the carpet's stained, it's old, the walls are not dirty, but just not bright. And when a light goes out, like, you're kind of sending a message that, at 5:05, you can take off. If somebody calls and they're a client who has an issue and you can't solve, that's okay. But like, when we invested in them, and I still remember one of the board members is like, hey, we're in financial trouble, and the first thing you're going to do is spend money.
Yes, that's what I was just thinking about. Like,
And that's
how do you justify?
But that's the right side up. You have to get your people on board, or you're never going to get the company on board.
Yeah.
And to round out that story, I remember we did break fix for technology. So if you had a computer, we were the company that came out and fixed your hard drive. If it was in a server and it was having troubles, and our average tech was doing 3.4 calls a day, and we did a little analysis very quickly my first week that we had to get to 4 calls a day to break even.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember giving a presentation at the end of my second week in a town hall saying, and it was 3 slides. It was, we do 3.4, we need to get to 4.0. And so
Which
I'm
is
asking,
not a huge jump. It's not like you had to double it, right?
Well, at the time, my head of operations was like, hey, Vernon, you don't come from the break fix industry. 4 is really tough. And I said, you're right. Like, but if we don't get to 4, we don't have a company.
Yeah.
And the next slide was a picture of 2 glasses and a bottle of champagne. I said, guys, we're either going to get to 4.0 in 6 months or we're not. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a party regardless.
Yeah.
If we get to 3.9, the party's going to be, we're out of business, let's have a goodbye party. If we get to 4, it's going to be a celebration that we get to stay in business. But either way, we've got 6 months to get to 4.0. And we wound up getting to 4.0, 4.1, 4.5. But that was clear direction, but it was also believing in people. And I remember people saying, well, quickly, hands were going up, questions were coming in, saying, Brennan, can you tell us how we're going to get there? And my answer was no.
Because you didn't know the answer
No,
yet?
I didn't. I said,
did you say
guys,
to them, I don't know the answer,
I
we'll
said,
work
guys,
together?
I don't know
Or
how
you
we're
said,
going to get to 4.
I can't tell you, it's like a secret.
No, I don't know how we're going to get to 4. What I do know is we don't make money at 3.9.
Yes.
So 3.9 is just not an option.
Yeah.
4.0 is, but I said, here's where you technicians know how to become more efficient. Managers, we got to work as a group to get there. But we got there, and the people that got us there the most, believe it or not, were the technicians telling us where there were inefficiencies. They also got paid per call, so they wanted to do more, and so it was a good story in that. Like, you going back to have the courage to fail and the faith to succeed, you have to have the courage to fail. Like, guys, failure could happen if we don't get to 4, but you have to have the faith that we can get there.
Okay, so let me challenge that a little bit. And I totally get what you're saying, but if the company failed, you got to 3.8, 3.9, and you would have had that party with the champagne, and you're saying the Titanic going down, but we're going to have champagne on the way. What will be the personal risk for you?
I mean, for me, it was
reputation, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the
fine.
biggest one is just reputation, that I went in and didn't turn the company around.
Okay, so how do we deal with, let's just say, someone who's opening a restaurant? Let's talk about a lot of our listeners are kind of younger entrepreneurs. The risk is much higher. Yeah. Like way higher, right? It's not even like, look, the worst thing, I go home, I did well in the past, I'm probably going to do again, someone else is going to hire me again, I'll be... The person who put all the equity in, put all their money in name and maybe personal guaranteed loans or whatever it is, the risk is higher. How do you deal with that fear that if the ship is going down, I'm going down with it? This is not just about like, okay, I'll sit at home 6 months and then I'm going to find another gig.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the first 3 pillars I talk about: leadership, culture, and people, and that you got to put the right leaders around you that are going to help lift the company, lift the restaurant, whatever it is, to success. And, when I would go into a new company, people would always say, oh, do you bring your own group of people in? And my answer was no. Like, I go in assuming I'm going to get that team to come together, collaborate, and get there. Now, they never will. If you have 10 people on the leadership team, all 10 aren't going to work out. It's just a
Yes.
fact. But if you go in saying half of them aren't going to work out, well, you're already preconditioned to it. So what I try to do is and you can very quickly tell who is and who isn't. And then there's some people where you're like, I'm not sure. It's going to depend on, do they check in or not?
Yeah.
But there'll be a few people where you go, they've been in this industry so long, or they've been in this company so long. They're not necessarily toxic, but they just don't believe in the company's future.
Yeah, which
when
is
that
toxic.
happens,
when you have to turn around,
you
it's
do
toxic.
have to move that.
It's an
them
anchor
out.
that never lifted, so it keep on dragging the ship, right? Like,
And then you have other people that no one put enough faith and courage in them. And when you put that faith and courage in them, they'll take off. So one of the things I talk about is building a team with a third of people that are like institutional, that have been at the company for a long time, know the company, maybe know that particular restaurant. A third from competitors that know how other people do things and can bring best practices. And then have a third from outside the industry that kind of say, so when person A says, here's how we do it here, and person B says, that's great, but I was at a competitor and we used to beat you a lot, and here's how we used to do it. And you go, oh, that's even better. But having a third party say, why do you do that at all? Like for instance, when I went into fleet management, it wasn't the most technology advanced industry. It wasn't a fast-paced industry. So when I came from technology and financial services, faster-paced industries, I just naturally said, well, why are we doing that manually? Why wouldn't we tech enable that? Why do our customer service agents have like swivel chair where they're on two different systems? Why can't we integrate that into one system? And the first answers I'd get is they're in two systems.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay, let me rephrase. Could we put a user interface on top of those two systems and make it exponentially easier and all of a sudden be like, oh, we never thought of that. But that was natural because the industry hadn't thought of that. But when you come from another industry where you're like, I've never seen, this swivel chair option where they're in different systems, boy, that's like double work. And oh, by the way, when you're in two different systems, your data is always corrupt. It's never correct.
Yeah.
And so just little things like that. So I try to, as I've done turnaround transformations, believed in the team, also believe that not everyone's going to make it, and that's okay. Creating off-roads and off-ramps for those that aren't going to make it with dignity, because they did serve the company for a number of years, extended period of time. The industry changed, they weren't willing to change with it or whatever.
Or don't have the capacity or the ability.
And what I'd say is going in without preconceived notions, because the person you think isn't going to make it is going to wind up being your all-star. And there's going to be somebody that doesn't make it, and you go, I don't get it. They had the most capacity of anybody to make it, but they weren't willing. And you can't will someone to get there. Yeah,
that's really great point. I want to stop on for a second. So you're saying a new board or new advisory board, whatever the structure of the company is, it has to be third. One, bring wisdom.
Yep.
People were like basically something you cannot teach. Wisdom is something of experience, ongoingly older knows. But the challenge, correct me if I'm wrong, what I understand is the wisdom gives you deep understanding, but also it limits because you think in a particular path.
Sure.
Okay, right?
Yep.
The third one is obvious, right? Like thinking outside of the box.
Yep.
Think about Tesla is a great example, I think, of someone who did not come from the car industry and say, no, this is a software.
Yeah.
This is not about cars, and many, many examples like that. Talk about the middle one. What's the third group, and why do you think that is that important? Because I get the wisdom and I get the new way of thinking.
Yeah, I think bringing people in from your competitors that do the same things you do, but do it differently. They, like, for instance, we brought people in at my last company from the competitors that we wanted to be like. We said, we want to be like that company.
Oh, got you. So like stealing talent to some degree.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and taking their best talent and saying, okay, you guys know how to do this in very large enterprise clients. We do small, medium business. Help teach us how to do those large enterprise clients.
But why would they come to you? If you're not a huge success yet, right? Or worse, the ship is going down unless you're going to turn around. Yep. Why would they jump ship from a comfortable place and come to you? What are you offering them that will do that? Culture.
And that's why culture is important. Bring them in, have them walk around the building. Bring them into a company event and say, hey, come to this company event. At my last company, we had a suite at the Patriots games. I'd tell a lot of our recruits for leadership roles, hey, do yourself a favor, come on Saturday. We'll make a name tag. You'll see clients, you'll see prospects, you'll see bankers, you'll see employees. Just hang out. And inevitably, I'd get this has a totally different vibe than where I'm at. You guys are much more, entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are having more fun. And then it would turn into almost what do I have to do to be part of that? Because people want to be part of something. I think as creatures walking this earth, we have this desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
Yes.
Some people are entrepreneurs and create that. Other people follow the entrepreneurs who are creating
and they want
it.
to jump on that exciting ship.
And so when somebody sees, hey, I'm at a great company, but we're big and we're steady, and then they see this company that's on this, mission. They've got this clear vision, and they're going about it, with a certain verve and a certain passion. It becomes extremely contagious. So that's why the top 3 of the 8 pillars I talk about of transformation.
Yeah.
If you get those 3, then you can move 10 degrees to the right, 10 degrees to the left. You can decide to start a new business and you can figure it out. If you don't get those right, it's really tough to see the opportunities. And I think that's something that, in the companies I've had a chance to lead, we've focused on and we've gotten right.
Tell me about a time that you didn't get it right.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, one of the reasons when I wrote, the Zenith Code, we're so fascinated as a culture by our success, right?
Yep.
People talk about success, that's the thing. I think an extreme example will be Donald Trump. Never talks about the failures. Everything is he'll spin
The
it to
best.
exactly. It's fabulous, it's amazing, But that's his thing. No matter what, he's so thick-skinned about he's going to present it, whether it's true or not, different. About success, right? I'm actually more interested in failure because I can tell you I've learned from my failures way more than I learned from success. So I get, look, you are a successful person in many, many ways. Were there times when you failed, when you came in with emotion, and then tell us why? Why do you think it failed? And what did you miss that made it fail? Was it just the forces of the market or was it something that you missed?
Yeah. So I'll talk about 2 different failures. One that was for a company, and then one was within a company. So my first startup after I left EDS was out in Silicon Valley, and it was during the tech, the big
Boom.
tech build.
2000 was it? Or
yeah, it was 98, 99.
Yeah.
Well, we took off. We built a company from $1 million to $100 million in a year. We're doing great.
Value or
no,
revenues?
Revenue.
So a real company, not one of those Silicon Valley valuation.
No. We actually wound up getting
Wow.
Cisco invested $90 million. Michael Dell invested $10 million. We had $1 billion valuation. But the mistake we made was we grew too fast, and we never had that connected culture that I talk about. And
why? Because you're working too hard?
No, we grew too fast. When you grow that fast, to maintain a unified culture, I would argue is it's impossible.
Yeah.
Because I look back and I say, well, how did we not build it? And I'm like, we were doing all the right things, but when you just grew that fast and you were, literally every 2-3 weeks opening up a new city. We're going to open up Dallas, then we're going to open up Houston, then we're going to open up Detroit, then we're going to open up London, then we're going to open up Paris. And you do all that in such a condensed time frame, you can't keep that culture together. So I look at, now during that time, we got all our investors' money back, which they would tell you, hey,
that's
was
a big
success.
deal. That's exactly.
But I would tell you,
but for you
from
personally,
somebody
it was
that
a
was in
failure.
it, it was the biggest failure. I remember, some really dark days personally. We'll put it this way, I went from owning a house to having to sell the house and moving into an apartment.
Yeah.
So it was not only a professional failure, it was like a personal financial failure.
Which is, by the way, bring us to probably your wife, because that moment she could have been like, no, but we're used to this. And she said, no, I'm your partner.
Oh yeah. And I had left at the time EDS was 86 on the Fortune 100, we didn't have to worry about, mortgage payments at all. But she also knew that I viewed, if I want to be in technology, Silicon Valley is a Super Bowl of technology. you got to go there.
Yes.
You got to, you can't really be a technology guy if you haven't gone and taken a shot at, what can you do in Silicon Valley.
So you think that the failure was that you grew too much, right?
Yeah, we
too fast.
We grew too fast.
Okay, was it because you were, and I'm going to use a bold, were you greedy, or do you think the culture of Silicon Valley was demanding you to keep on like, we got to open every day, a new place?
We started the company already talking about our IPO.
I got you.
And at the time, companies were starting up and getting,
pet.com.
going public 2 years later at 2, 3, 4 billion valuations. And so I think it was all like a race against the clock until it burst. So, what's interesting, I remember some of my friends back at EDS when the company, and we sold the company to another one. So, it was professionally probably on a resume, it was probably neutral. But if you were me or you were on the leadership team, you viewed it as, no, this was not a success. I had people say, wow, hey, are you going to come back? And I said, no, I learned so much. And they're like, but isn't that horrible? I still remember, I said, hey, I'm 29 turning 30 and I don't worry about me. I'm wiped out, but I got 30 more years.
Yes.
I worry about the person that's 59 that just got wiped out. But, I can tell you, I drew for the rest of my career more lessons from that than I did the successes. And then, so that's like failure one, company. Failure two, when I got to Merchants and in my very first meeting with the leadership team, I said, guys, here's my thesis of how we're going to take these 6 companies, consolidate them into one. But then I want, the 3 heads of the 3 different divisions. I want each of you to start 2 new businesses this year.
Inside the
company. Yeah. And I expect 1 to fail for each of you. And what's very interesting is they really, really wrestled with that.
What, with the failure part?
With the failure, but
why do you want me to start a business that's going to fail?
They were like, well, if one fails, then you're going to fire me? And I'm like, no. Like, what I do know is if you try to start 2 businesses and you take all the time to plan them all, right, it's going to take too long. So we built 8 new businesses during my time there, and 2 failed miserably. And by the way, the 2 that failed miserably, I wouldn't have thought those were going to be the ones that failed.
Were they failing under the same person, or were they failing?
No.
So it wasn't a personal phenomenon, someone of your, kind of management or the C level that was just not good enough. It was
no. We one was a business model. We said, hey, we're going to go after the franchise segment. We thought this was great. And we said, look at this franchise. They have 5,000 vehicles. That's a great client. Until we realized they don't have 5,000 vehicles. What they have is they have 1,000 franchisors that each have 5.
Oh, yeah.
And we weren't built
highly
to
fragmented,
go manage 1,000 at 5. Matter of fact, like I would tell you where we were losing money there is it took so much to service all of those versus one client that had 5. So we just got that wrong. But what I think helped the company was us saying, we got it wrong. We exited in a year, and then we talked about it. So on town halls and in meetings, we'd say, hey guys, it's okay that happened. And I think that really helped people realize, like, yes, you can fail, and you're not going to lose your job. We're just going to move on. I think another win from that is our operations people that thought that business was like hell, delivering it, viewed it as, wow, the leaders in this company actually care about us, and realize that this was not good work for us to be doing.
So the fact that you pulled the plug on this one showed them that actually someone is listening to us in the upper level.
Yeah. And because I remember saying, like, why is this so hard to deliver? And I remember sitting down with some of our people, and when they explained it as, well, hey, this franchisor has 5 vehicles, and when one's a month late, it like destroys their business. I'm like, okay, I get that. Versus if it's a 5,000 unit fleet and one's a month late, they've got enough capacity to handle that. So I think talking about it and allowing people to see failures, also celebrating your successes, that's one thing that I've seen in my career is, if you're a gas, both feet on the gas pedal type, which I have generally been, is you got to learn when to brake. when to tap the brakes, but you've also got to realize that when you win, you have to celebrate that.
Yes.
Because you probably just put your team through a lot of strenuous work to get a business off the ground or to get a new client
It's like
off
that
the
greyhound.
ground.
You gotta catch the rabbit once in a while, because if you just keep on just never catching the rabbit on those races, they get frustrated and they go crazy, right? So
One thing that I wound up doing in my career, which which was not intentional, was the celebration with the champagne thing.
yes.
And it actually became, I actually, like, at the time, I didn't even like champagne. And throughout my career, I've actually started to enjoy it and said, all right, guys, hey, when we get this project launch for the tech team, and by the way, it's not just when you win clients, or it's not when you hit a revenue number, it's how do you celebrate when finance puts a new finance system in place? How do you celebrate when marketing comes up with a new brand? How do you celebrate when your technology launches your new disaster recovery? So don't make it just about like top line revenue or when you sign a client, but like, how do you pause and actually, and we used to have like champagne moments. And I
think it's also acknowledging the team, because they work so hard. I mean, you're the CEO, you probably have an equity position, so you do very well financially, ongoingly, and if things really turn around. I always thought about the second and third tier of my employees that never had the equity I had. Yep. And I was like, they have to experience celebration. I remember when I was real estate, there's a tradition in New York, I don't know if you know it, I don't know if it's only in New York, when you top the building, the concrete building, you put a flag, like a U.S. flag. Unions put generally the U.S. flag and a union flag on it. And then it's kind of like a thing, like, right? We used to close the office and bring all the employees and do like a spread of like food and everything and lunch on the top of the building. And it's not high. I build 12, 14 floor buildings, not crazy high rise. That was my specialty. I loved looking at that bookkeeper.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That secretary, that person who's nothing to do with construction, when we all get on like a minibus or like get in different cars and go to the building, and they get a chance to actually have a tangible experience of a success, of a milestone. And then it's like, oh, that's where all the entry level I do, actually that would translate to something that's concrete, right?
Well, what I found too is, bring your partners and your clients into some of those celebrations.
Yes.
I remember when we opened up we created a new headquarters, and we invited the architect and the project manager from the outside. And I remember the project manager for the construction company, when we did this, and I said, "Here, why don't you uncork one of the bottles?" And he was funny. He was like, I've actually never had champagne before. He's doing it. And he kind of got emotional. I said, what are you getting so emotional? He goes, I've never been invited to anything like this.
So nice.
I build these buildings, so using your...
Yeah.
But then I never get to experience the opening with the client.
Yeah.
And I viewed it as, you spent 9 months of your life, reconstructing this building for us. Like, it's great that you're here. And by the way, he gave the actual best talk at the building kickoff, because everyone's like, oh, to our bright future. And he just said, I got to know your culture as I got to build this building, the way you like open spaces, and you have walls of whiteboards. You're clearly a collaborative company where you value people's opinions. And you're like, he could tell that by how we designed the building. And he goes, how much thought went into your cafeteria? It kind of explained to me like how much you care about employees that want to eat in groups, people that want to eat by themselves, and people that want to come and just read at lunch. And you sat there like listening to him going, he gets our culture.
Yeah. So you heard it and said, he gets our culture. An employee of yours heard and says, someone cares about me.
Exactly.
Which is very important. Like it's a multiple of returns, because if someone who's a junior or middle management hears it, go like, wow, if the architect or the project manager got it, then I'm important.
Yeah, and it was just, and that's why I still remember, I thought that was the best kickoff talk, because he didn't know our culture. He didn't work in the company, but he nailed it.
Yeah.
And what I remember looking at the architect and saying, hey, you should be really proud in this moment, because you listened to us as a team, what we were trying to create, and you nailed it as the architect who created the spaces. And by the way, they did commercial architecture and he did commercial real estate. And I actually got them to redo my house.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and they said, we don't do residential.
Like,
I go,
for me, you will.
I go, will you please? Because I go, you guys were such good listeners at understanding what we were trying to create, that like, can you help? And they did a great job.
That's
with
so
it.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to shift a little bit. When I look and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
If I look at your two books, it feels to me like the first book is about going beyond fear.
Yep,
or like
it
not
is.
letting fear stopping you. That's another way to look at it. So kind of like from a minus to a zero, right? But your last book is about going to the next level. It's like being bold, right? So there's like almost like a you pick up speed as you. Is it because you got older and wiser and you realize not being stopped by fear is not sufficient? You have to go and become bold? Or walk me through the two books. Like when should I, if I had a choice, when should I read the first one to not get stopped as I'm younger and then go to the next level?
They're kind of not different audiences, but they're different purposes. So the first book got really born out of COVID. So during COVID, I saw, people really become fearful, just because like we didn't know what was up. People were in our homes. And I wound up writing a coffee table book and just self-publishing. And I think I made 500 copies, 400 or 500, and I sent them out as holiday gifts that year. And I just said, wrote a little note card, have the courage to fail, faith to succeed. This too will pass, all that stuff. And I had all these people saying, hey, can I get another? I'm like,
I don't have one.
Like, I don't. So that was the precursor to the FUD factor, facing your uncertainty, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so that was really just helping anybody at any age. Like,
it's very,
I tried
it's
to
very
write
technical in a good way. I'm saying it really walks you step by step, which is really important, like almost like a manual to,
Yeah, and it also, I try to bring in people of all different ages, from, a high school kid who wants to go play college lacrosse to a middle-aged executive at an accounting firm who learned to say yes, and, everything in between. The second book, Dare to Disrupt, was kind of different. So we had gone through part of Merchants Transformation, and every year I would give a kickoff at our client summit. And I used to always do it on something around leadership, because I said, everybody's coming out. We'd have 500 or 600 people. They don't need me to talk about the company. They know that they're here.
Yeah, they live
and
it.
by the way, they expect me to give a promo for the company. So like one year I gave it on, fearless leadership. And this year I gave it on, if when you go back to your company, if you're looking to do something great, if you're looking to transform, here's how you can do it. And I laid out what was at the time the fundamentals of Dare to Disrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, I had just under 25 of our clients and partners say, hey, can you come talk to our leadership team?
So
will you come talk at our conference? And, we're doing, pillars 2, 6, and 8. And I don't think I called them pillars at that time. And that's when I said, you know what, I should really package this into a book. And to some extent, I said, the book's written, I just actually have to write it. And what I saw was, one person was from a Fortune 100 company. I remember him saying, he goes, we are in the midst of a business transformation. And if your talk is right, we have no chance. And I go, well, maybe my talk isn't right. And I knew where he worked. I go, you work at a pretty successful company. He goes, nope. Every one of our leaders has been here for 30 years. The culture hasn't changed. And, we have great people. So I said, well, if you haven't brought in any new people on your leadership, why do you think all of a sudden you're going to fundamentally change?
Yeah.
And, sometimes you need a couple outside people to catalyst for change. Now, one aspect of leadership teams I didn't hit on yet, and I do want to hit on, especially for your young audience, there's one part of diversity that's not talked about, and it really frustrates me, and it's diversity of age. Mm-hmm. So on every leadership team I've been on, I've tried to have, and I've said tried because it hasn't been perfect. I've tried to have somebody in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and somebody in their 60s.
Really?
On the leadership team. And the reason is the way the 60-year-old will go to solve a problem and the way the 29-year-old will go solve a problem is
right?
very, very differently. And oftentimes, a couple of your younger team on the leadership team become big catalysts for your innovation and your change. And the best analogy I can use to explain this that I think a lot of people will understand is when you were a kid, did you ever get given a Rubik's Cube?
Of course.
Did you finish it?
No.
I didn't finish it.
I put a screwdriver through it and rebuilt it. You know how you can take it apart because I was so frustrated.
I remember playing with it, trying to get it, getting frustrated and leaving it. And I remember giving my son one. He was 12 or 13. I gave it to him on Christmas morning, Christmas afternoon. He had it solved. And, you know,
without watching a YouTube tricks.
No, he's not a savant. I don't think he's any smarter than me. He did go to YouTube. He went to YouTube. He found somebody. I go, how did you solve that? He goes, YouTube. And the guy showed, he goes, he showed me an algorithm on how to solve it.
Yeah. That's not even like a
60-year-old would not have gone to
it's
YouTube.
So like it's a blind spot
a
for you,
6-year-old
right?
would have picked it up and just started working it. So when you think of that as problem solving, a 14-year-old was smarter than a 50-year-old at how to problem solve. So I think as you build your leadership team, you know, have diversity, but have diversity of age, because they will approach it differently. I guarantee you today, because when I on my last company, we were just starting into AI. Matter of fact, when we started into it, we called it machine learning before AI. But I guarantee you, if you don't have somebody earlier in their career on your leadership team, you're probably missing some of what AI can do for you. And I know, like literally every week, I try to do one new thing in AI, and it just blows my mind at what you can do.
Yeah, you're stealing my question, so we're going to pause on AI for a second. But you know, we were making a list of movies through this one. We start with Yes Man, right? The next one is The Intern.
Oh yeah,
with Rob. It's a great.
Yeah,
like,
true.
I like my son is a real entrepreneur, and those are two movies that are just a great family movies.
Yeah.
But The Intern is about this guy who's older and retired, doesn't know what to do, and he works, and he brings that wisdom, right, as an older person. So we have two movies. Let's see if we can get another one. I know which one is the third one. So I want to cover two more things. If you know. So first one, look, a big part of your life is racing.
Yeah.
Right. And we can spend 3 hours on that. I've been to a few Formula Ones, love it. And other ones. Why do you like, is it the adrenaline? Is it the marriage between machine and human? What's the thing that gets you that exciting about it?
Well, it goes back to growing up, in New Hampshire. We had one big console TV, and my dad liked Magnum PI. And so we watched Magnum PI growing up.
Testarossa, wasn't it?
No, it was a Ferrari 308.
Oh, 308. Okay, yeah.
So I grew up watching this guy that was super cool driving a red Ferrari 308.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, and I grew up in New Hampshire. I had never seen a Ferrari. They weren't around.
I had one on my wall.
And I remember saying, I want to have a Ferrari by my 25th birthday. Now, why when I was a teenager did I say that? Don't know. So like that started me down the path of enjoying sports cars. And I remember I did get one right before my 25th, but before anybody thinks, I was wildly successful, like if you saw my apartment, if you saw what I drove daily, if you saw like my groceries, you'd be like, okay, so you put a lot of money into that.
But why did you do it? Because of passion or because of image?
Oh, it was all passion.
Oh, because there's famous stories about Hugh Hefner, drove a convertible Mercedes in Chicago in the winter because his image was about like being this playboy, right? But he had no money but that's how he established. He realized it's going to be a key to his success, that image that he was building.
No, as a matter of fact, when I have a story of when I went to look at my first Ferraris. I went to Ferrari of Arlington, Virginia. I walk in the door. I'm 21 years old, and the guy stands up and he goes, "Don't touch the cars."
Because he thought you just coming and took a picture.
Totally intimidated me.
Yeah, of course.
To the point where I just left.
Yeah.
And then
by the way, bad lesson to prejudging someone just by walking in.
And then a year later, I went to Ferrari of Washington, which was a second dealer in the area. And I walked in and I said, "I'm not going to touch the cars." He goes, "Of course you're not going to touch the cars. You're going to get in." And his name was Dave Olympi. And
what a great lesson! What a great lesson in sales.
So we got in and he's like, hey, this is this car, this is this car. And they have like a little library where they have different books. And he's over there. He goes, "Come on over here." And he goes, "Okay." And I told him what I want to do. He goes, "This is going to be your first Ferrari." And I said, "Why is that one going to be mine?" He goes, "Well, you see, it's a 2+2. It's got the front end of the Ferrari 308, 328, and it's got two jump seats in the back." I go, No. I want a Ferrari, just a 2-seater, not a 4-seater. I go, "I don't want that." He goes, "That's why it's going to be your first. No one wants this." And he goes, "Because of it, it's the least expensive pre-owned car to buy." I still remember I bought it for $30,000. I sold it a couple of years later for $35,000.
Nice.
But it was the least desirable Ferrari you could buy because no one wanted a 4-seater.
Yeah.
And by the way, just to round out on Dave wound up coming to my wedding. I still talk to him, and I've bought
cool.
probably 50 cars from him.
Wow.
So to the salesperson at BMW of Arlington, it's like Goodwill Hunting.
Yes.
You know, how about them apples? Or
Here's the third movie.
Or how about this Pretty Woman? Do you work on commission?
Yeah, exactly.
Big mistake.
Yeah.
So that got me into cars. So then from there, I just really like cars. From there, I like going to races, and then I started following Formula One. You know, I didn't grow up
before it became huge with Netflix.
I would say before, but not like wildly before. And I remember then like going to my first race. I'm just like,
Which one did you go to?
I went to Coda in Austin.
Yes, Austin.
Yeah, and I was just like,
great
okay,
race. I've been there. Yeah,
and it's a great course. So,
but I don't think you get. I mean, you don't get Formula One until you go to Monza.
Okay.
That's like that. When I went to Austin, I went to Barcelona. But when you go to Monza, you realize what a real fan is. You know, like that's
they're crazy.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, experience. Yeah.
So I just I really enjoyed it, and then I had a chance to buy into a company, United Autosports, which is we race the McLaren GT3s, and we just announced that, or McLaren announced at Le Mans this year that they're going to come back into hypercar, which they haven't been in.
Cool.
And so we're going to race those cars for them. Zach Brown, their CEO, who has a great book coming out.
Oh, really?
0.7 of a second. It actually came out this week. You know, he's a co-owner in it. And then I bought part of Andretti Extreme E. And it's just something I've really enjoyed.
So to go back to the question, is it you sitting in a seat? Like, what's the thing that, or just like it's a passion? Like I grew up, I was obsessed by cars when I was a kid.
So I grew up, the passion was cars.
I got you.
And then the passion became, wow, look at what these cars are capable of. And then I just became just really in tune with the difference between winning and losing is such a fractional thing. And although it looks like an individual sport, it's not at all.
No, it's a huge team.
And it's a big team. Like take McLaren, you know, which is my team, and we've won the last 2 Constructors Cups. You know, it's a 1,000-person firm. And, you know, if you ever look at how they build that car, I mean, it takes all 1,000 people to be successful. And, you know, that's why, you know, like I look at their CEO, who is the definition of fearless and believes in people and culture and talks openly about leadership. And I put him as the best boss in F1 because he first talks about leadership, people, and culture before he gets to it's about the driver and it's about the car. Yeah. And I think he really gets leadership.
And it's a really cutthroat business, right?
Well, you know,
first of all, you lose money constantly. Most teams lose money.
Most teams lose money until the Netflix series Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
Like I'll give you an example in like pre-Drive to Survive, or right about Drive to Survive. You know, take McLaren. It was trading at $1.5 billion. They just sold 30% of it at $4.8 billion.
Nice.
You know,
it's
so
like a sport team,
but Drive to Survive, and then in the U.S. there used to be just one race in the U.S. Now there's Austin, Vegas, which I'm leaving for and going to this weekend, and then there's Miami. So we've got 3 of the 25 races, and
there's some rumors about New Jersey, but I'm not sure about that. Wasn't there like an idea about like they were pitching in Jersey?
Well, there's so many cities pitching,
but also it's impossible to like you try to cover Japan and all those like you know and all the.
Well, there's 25 races, and you know. And the races take a lot out of the teams, and you know and you know they're all over the world. Yeah. So yeah.
Unbelievable. That's great. What's your favorite car?
My next one.
Do you know what the next one is, or just like
I do.
Okay. I do. Are you allowed to say it? You know.
I am. So I'm having a McLaren W1 built right now. I was just over there building it.
Where do you drive it? That's one of the challenges. I had a Porsche for a few years. And I got so many tickets. I got my license revoked twice. Like,
oh no!
Like no, but look, I have a heavy, you know, because I used to drive not on your level, but I used to drive as a hobby, and then you can really hit it. But you know, when you get used to driving, I wasn't a crazy driver, never got in an accident.
Yeah.
But how do you drive in the U.S. this car?
Yeah, well, you know that one I'll drive limited. But another one I'm having built right now is back when some people forget Mercedes owned McLaren at one point. And they made this car, the Mercedes-Benz McLaren SLR. And McLaren was taking 20 of them back and putting high downforce kits on them and kind of customizing them. And I've got one over there getting done right
That's
now.
delicious.
But yeah, they're neat. But when I say next car, I viewed it as it was a hobby, it was a passion. And I can't tell you how many cars I bought from Dave that I didn't see, I didn't know how the car drove, and I'd get it.
Collecting art,
and I'd say like,
right?
I'm just going to drive it for a year.
Yeah.
And what I found is there were cars that I never would have bought that I liked. Like one of my favorite cars to drive on a daily basis was an Audi R8. You can just jump in, super easy
Great
to
car.
drive.
Yeah.
There's other cars where you can't just jump in and figure it out right away. An R8, you could take off.
I had one actually. It's great.
Yeah,
car.
they're
really
fantastic.
Great. I like it better than the 750, but that's a different conversation, which is kind of the same. Yeah. Okay. Last thing is, you brought up AI, and I love to ask questions for people who are coming to this podcast about AI, because I think we're pretty much about the same age.
Yep.
We both play because we're at the edge of like business. Whole thing we play with AI and everything. What would you say is your personal biggest exciting thing about AI, and also what's your biggest concern about AI?
So what excites me about it is the ability to upskill anybody. So, you can take a person that has a skill level of here, whatever this is, and through AI, they can upskill 1 or 2 levels.
Yeah.
Why? Because they can, through prompting and working with it and modeling and doing whatever, they can become much more capable. My son was an intern this summer. He came home one night from the internship and he goes, "Can I show you what I was working on today?" And when he showed me, I said, "How did you do that?" And he just looked at me and goes, "AI."
Yeah.
I took my spreadsheet, I threw it into AI, I did all these prompts, and he came out with this model. He was operating, it was end of his freshman year, going into sophomore year of college. He was operating as like a second-year analyst, financial analyst, yet he didn't have that training, he didn't have that knowledge, but AI had allowed him to take the wisdom and intelligence of others and dramatically upskill him. So what I'm excited about is, people that want a better life, people that want more in their life can leverage AI to become smarter, to become more capable, to learn more. What's my biggest concern with it?
So before you go there, I heard I listened to a lecture last week, and I heard a great tip that I used this week. He said, build a board with people that you really admire, and try people who actually been published a lot, and get them as the advisor and have a weekly meeting with them all on AI. So I built last week a board for myself.
Okay.
And like, for example, Michael Bloomberg is always an inspiration for me because he's a very tough business person and he made a difference through politics, etc. So I built a board.
Yeah.
And I had 2 meetings so far with my quote unquote board.
Virtual board.
Of course.
Okay.
It's AI.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to it. So here I am talking to my board, and I literally ask AI, ChatGPT, to build with those people on my board, which I don't have access directly to Michael Bloomberg, right? But I invited him, and with all the information about him online, the board, quote unquote, conversation where the people are like, I would love to have that dream board with me. So exactly what you said. Your son took something that is not available on the obvious level and brought all that wisdom into conversation. I had the most amazing week consulting, quote unquote, with people that I don't have access to because of that large wisdom availability.
But just think of, you became 10% more innovative. Your vision got 5% further down the road by leveraging it.
Yes.
So that dovetails right into my biggest concern, that those that embrace it will take off and those that don't will be left behind. And we potentially will create a bigger gap between knowledge workers and non-knowledge workers. Yeah. And, it's like when I'd go into a company, people that would embrace the new vision and the new strategy would go further in the company than those that said, nope, I'm hunkering down, I'm not changing.
Yeah.
If someone's on a finance team, let me just stick with that same example. If they're on a finance team and they aren't leveraging AI to help them find mistakes in the monthly P&L, aren't saying, hey, what are ways we can become more profitable, then the people that are going to be the ones that get the promotion. Yeah. And the ones that don't, that are just slugging it out the way it's been slugged out for the last hundreds of years, are going to be left behind. And the person that gets promoted because they've come up with, hey, I'm in finance, I'm not in operations, but I came up with 4 ways we could become more profitable. and they get promoted because they're seen as a problem solver. They're seen as somebody who's, thinking outside the box and driving more value for the business. You might ask them and say, oh no, I just leveraged AI to analyze our income statement, and I prompted this and I did this and I automated that, and I actually got something that takes 10 hours a week down to 2 hours a week through efficiency, which allowed me then to spend 8 hours thinking about the future of the business, which got noticed by my boss and my boss's boss, and that's how I got promoted.
Yeah.
So, the thing I love about it is the opportunity for an average person to become an above average, for a smart person to become even smarter, for somebody with, capacity on a scale 1 to 10 of 5 to being a person who has an 8 on the capacity scale. My concern is the person at the 5 that doesn't embrace it
go down to 2
is going to, on the new scale, a 5 is going to become a 2.
Yes. I have a friend who have 2 kids at Penn.
Oh, great school.
And yes, we were just talking a few days ago, and he said, look, when my daughter was going to Penn, she's a senior right now, they said, don't use AI. Like, we're going to catch you if you catch you using AI, etc. His son, who's a freshman at Penn, they say use AI all the time, because what they realized is that they did a full 180, saying, if you go for a job interview and you're exactly the same, like my resume is exactly like yours, we all accomplish the same thing, but I also have the ability to know how to swim in the new world called AI, I'm going to get a job. You will not.
Yeah.
Even though we both have the same resumes or whatever, the abilities, et cetera. So I think there's a shift there of understanding exactly what you said. Like, look, you have to use it. If not, you'll be left behind. And the difference is that in the past, left behind was a year. Now it's a month. It's like the speed of things would be like, so that's maybe.
Now, the thing we do have to watch out for is that we don't become so AI driven that we lose the ability to critically think for ourselves and the ability to problem solve for ourselves, that we use AI to enable us, but not do the work. And I think that's where, Penn version 1.0 was concerned, is AI going to do their work?
Yes.
And then they aren't actually going to learn. I think in Penn 2.0, they're saying, no, AI is going to enable our student to learn in an accelerated path. I think what we got to be careful of is that we don't learn on we don't complete the project on an accelerated path without learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't want to lose that curiosity, that learning capability, the critical thinking aspect of being in a leadership role.
Yeah. You're bringing the two together last. I know that I just read that there's a new league of driverless cars driven by AI, right?
Yep.
So developed by Qatar or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, over in the Middle East.
Do you think it's going to take over?
No, I don't. I don't. Okay. And the reason is, I just think people like watching people.
Yeah, and love the mistakes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's too perfect, too computer driven, then it might help developing better cars, but it's not going to be a league that we'll be fascinated by, right?
Oh yeah, like if you think of F1, everybody likes talking about Lewis and Max and Lando and Oscar and
Hamilton,
who's favored.
Don't forget, my favorite.
I don't think anyone's going to.
Oh, you said Lewis in the beginning. Yeah, sorry.
I don't think people are going to become as enamored talking about.
Yes, exactly.
The
chip, this chip versus that chip. That Intel versus. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much.
This has been great. Thank you.
So great.